Thank you very much, Alistair. I'm especially heartened to hear you refer to it as Gen Z, which is a rare thing in Britain where seemingly lots of people prefer Gen Z.
So I refuse to be mimified.
So I will try to adopt your usage. On the subject of memes, I think it says a lot about my internet-poisoned mind that the first thing I thought of, and the first thing I ever think of when I hear the word dissent now, is a meme. It's a meme I'm sure many of you have seen before, and fortunately it is also a legitimate and influential piece of art. It's the famous painting by Norman Rockwell, 1943, which depicts, the title of the painting is Freedom of Speech, and it's part of a series obviously produced during the Second World War. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It shows a man with a sort of tweed shirt and a jacket sort of undone almost all the way, standing up at a sort of town meeting, and people around him sort of look awed and some of them even slightly horrified because he's clearly going against the grain. He's clearly a dissenter. Now, I have seen this image probably thousands of times. It's usually used on Twitter when people want to put out a controversial opinion that they think they're going to be sort of attacked over. But until very recently, I didn't know what the painting actually depicts. Who is this man? What is the town hall? So bizarrely, it's not the most glamorous event. It's a normal town hall meeting. The local school has just burned down. Understandably, most of the residents of the town, this is Arlington, most of the residents of Arlington want to rebuild the school. And so they're moving towards a unanimous agreement. And this one man gets up to say, well, I don't think we should rebuild the school because that will cost money and I don't want to be taxed for it, in effect. What I'm trying to say is it's something mundane, and actually he's dissenting on something where I think many of us would probably take the majority view that maybe it is a good thing if the school has burned down to rebuild it. And even then, it's a powerful piece of art, and it's been a successful meme because there was something attractive, there was something glamorous about the dissenter, about being the lone voice going against the grain, even over something mundane, even over something unpopular. And that's precisely, I think, the point. We are attracted to the idea of dissent, and I think young people especially are attracted to the idea of dissent, even when they're not willing to dissent themselves. Is it more difficult to dissent now than it used to be? I think this is a tricky question to address. Of course, on one level, literally, no, it's not. We have extraordinary freedoms in 21st century Britain to say what we like. Social media gives us the opportunity to express ourselves in all sorts of ways. It gives us the opportunity, if we wish, to dissent in the public sphere, which would have been very tricky to do before the advent of social media. Although I certainly think Britain can go a lot further in protecting freedom of speech in all sorts of ways. By and large, we are able to disagree with the government of the day on most political issues. We are able to go against the grain of popular opinion, usually, if we're brave enough. But I think the point about bravery is the fundamental one. Why does it feel often harder to dissent now than it perhaps used to be, or than it might be in other countries? And I think it is related to a sort of general crisis of courage in public life. I think we have fewer examples of people like the man in the Norman Rockwell painting who possess the courage to dissent. I think this is something we can perceive in all aspects of life. Our university professors certainly are less able or less willing to dissent than they used to be. I have lost track of the number of times I've been talking to academics who will say, well, of course I don't believe in this or that, or of course I think this is nonsense, but I don't want to speak about this publicly, and I always want to sort of shake them by the shoulders and sort of say, well, if you don't do this, who will? I want, in other words, to call them a coward, and I think that this may be a just and valid reaction, but of course we can also sympathise with people in this position. Likewise, we don't usually expect courage from our politicians anymore. A few months ago, there was a scandal that's now sort of long since forgotten the way these things are, when the Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, changed the order of motion and engaged in all sorts of parliamentary manoeuvrings in effect to ensure that Labour wouldn't have to vote a certain way on a motion pertaining to Israel and Palestine, because Labour MPs had written to him saying that they were concerned about threats to their safety. Now, on the one hand, I can sympathise with Lindsay Hoyle for doing this. It's admirable and virtuous that he would choose to protect the safety of parliamentarians. But on the other hand, I can't help but think of, say, the 94 socialist or social democratic deputies in Germany in 1934 who voted against the Enabling Act, knowing that doing so was something that would, in some cases, risk death and certainly risk serious persecution. Because we live in safe and happy times, we don't expect the courage from authority figures that I think once would have been something we could have expected. And that does mean that if you're a young person, it is harder to dissent, it is harder to know that you will be backed up by the authorities. And it is harder, be they teachers or parents or academics or politicians, and it's harder to internalise the idea that dissent is not only something we valorise in theory, but something that we can actually do in practice. So I suppose the point I really want to underscore here is dissent is powerful, it is attractive, precisely because it requires courage and precisely because it involves incurring a risk. It is precisely because in dissenting you might lose friends and make enemies, you might make your own life more difficult and miserable. Therein lies its value. But history is full of examples of people who have had the courage to do so, often under far more extreme and perilous circumstances than our own. And the first step, I think, of how to be a dissenter as a young person in the 21st century is to take stock from their examples.
Okay, thank you very much.